The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Rylett. I'm the Vice President Central Canada with Restaurants Canada. And today I'm going to briefly go over some economic numbers, our latest survey, a quick overview of the federal programs and provincial sports, an update on the province's reopening plans, and we'll have some time to take your questions. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being with us. This is a critical time in our industry, and I know you're all facing some harsh realities, and we appreciate you lending your time to us, and hopefully we can provide some information that will help you. I also want to thank Stephanie, who is working doing our technical assist. I'm hoping you all will cut me some slack. We usually do these webinars, we're all in the same room and we get to talk to each other, and right now I'm just talking to myself. So if we have a little bit of trouble, I hope you'll understand. I also want to point out the chat feature. Now, some of you have already found it and have put questions in, but in the GoToWebinar box, you'll see at the bottom a chat icon. Just click on that. You can type in questions that will come directly to us. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and let's just get going. Okay. So first of all, and I know you all know this information, but I thought it's a good idea to show how we got here. This graph shows our last 4 industry surveys, and it basically shows how we hit the cliff, basically. As you can see, in February, we're already starting to see some of the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic that was hitting elsewhere. And then the first 2 weeks of March, it really hit. And then we went over the cliff in the last 2 weeks of March, as you already know. This slide is useful. It was done by our economist. It's not from the survey, but it's just sales data. It shows first half of March is 27% loss in sales, and the second half is 72% loss in sales. Now, I just want to emphasize that in April we saw a similar decline. It's around 72% decline. So that wasn't a one-off. As you all know, you're still feeling that sales decline. This graph is something we use a lot with government. It shows that 48% of operations are closed down. That only 38% have been able to take delivery. The worrisome number right now is 8% in the last survey said they've already decided not to reopen. This is a scary number. I think it'll be higher in our next survey because in our last survey, we also asked who thinks that they won't be able to reopen if this goes much longer. And I think after the 3-month period, it goes to about 50% of independents say they will close permanently. So again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I think it's important that you set the context. So getting onto the federal programs, CERB is the first one, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. This is the one you probably are all aware of. You've either looked into it or you've already are receiving it. Hopefully you've looked at it already, and hopefully you've been able to get some relief from it. It's not huge, but it does cover self-employed people. It also covers your employees, so you can at least get some relief from it. So if you haven't looked into CERB, hopefully you will. As long as you made $5,000 last year, you're eligible, and you don't have to be an employee. You can also be self-employed, as I mentioned. So hopefully you can look into that. The second thing that the government announced, the federal government announced, was the Canada Emergency Business Account. Now this is a loan. It's not a grant. It's supposed to be very easy to get because the federal government is backing it up. Unfortunately, I want to be honest with you, we haven't found that it's been that easy. This is the final approval body are banks. And as we all know, in our industry, banks are somehow problematic, to say the least. So we have seen some trouble. Some people have had to apply a few times and to push their banks harder. People are getting these loans, but again, they are loans and you will have to repay them. The good thing about it is 25% of the loan is forgivable. So if you are able to repay it by December 31st, you'll $10,000 will be forgiven. And just one other point, as I said, we have been seeing some trouble with the banks. If you are getting what you think is an unreasonable amount of feedback from the banks, don't hesitate to either contact us or better yet, contact your MP. This is the federal program. Your MPs are there to help you, and we have seen some cases where the MP has been able to cut through some of the red tape. The next loan that I want to talk about is the EDC loan. Now, again, this is something it existed before, and it's mainly it was mainly intended to be for expansion and for people that are looking to expand beyond their immediate borders. The criteria have been relaxed, and it has been addressed. Something that is supposed to be available for small businesses, but for restaurants, we found it hasn't really been the easiest option. And again, the approval of this program is through the bank, so it's not the easiest or best thing for restaurants, but it is there if you want to look into it. By all means, you should try. Finally, this is the program that was just announced. I think it's getting the most attention. Sometimes it's known as the CECRA, Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. In this case, Ontario put in some money, so it's called here Ontario. So basically, the problem with this, as you may or may not have found if you've already had the conversations with your landlords, this is a fairly good program. It enables you to only pay 25% of your mortgage. The biggest problem with it is that the landlord has to apply for it. So this requires your landlord to participate. This requires your landlord to agree to eat up to 25% of the cost of your rent. And not all landlords that we've talked to have agreed to this. What we have recommended to people that they point out to their landlords is a bird in the hand is good. We've had a long relationship. You know, I'm a good tenant. If we can't come to an agreement and you decide to do the worst and kick me out, then who are you going to get to replace me? And those are the kinds of conversations we're hearing that are being done with mixed reactions. The other problem with this program is it says you only have to pay 25% of your rent, but it doesn't include TMI, taxes, maintenance, and insurance. So whatever your TMI is, you still are on the hook for that, depending on your agreement with the landlord. Hopefully, for the maintenance part of it, you can come to some agreement to make it lower if there's no operations. And a lot of the taxes have been deferred by municipalities, so it's something you should look into when you're having those discussions with your landlord. And just one final point: if you haven't talked to your landlord yet, you really should. I think some people are just crossing their fingers and hoping to everything will work out. It's not going to. You need to talk to your landlord as soon as possible. The next, and this was the first program that was announced, but it's been the last one that's come on board line. It just came online either early this week or late last week. I can't remember. So You know, this is for the 38% that I mentioned are still able to offer. The majority of restaurants, unfortunately, it doesn't help at all. But if you are open, you are able to keep some of your employees on. It does pay up to 75% of your salaries, which is a great help. Again, this is retroactive back to March 15th. It's for a period of 12 weeks. The other caveat in this, and you need to make sure, if an employee cannot receive CERB and the wage subsidy. So if your employee has received CERB, they're not eligible to receive the wage subsidy. So they either have to stay off or they have to come back and you have to pay their entire wage. Or they can repay CERB. Those are the options. One question that we had early before we started was, can I, if I'm a self-employed person who's receiving CERB, can I get the wage subsidy for my employees? And the answer is yes. You can receive CERB personally and still pay your employees with it. You just can't receive CERB and the wage subsidy at the same time. And finally, before I move on to some questions about these, I just want to, some of the other federal government programs are the HST remittances are that you should be able to keep some of that cash in your pockets. But again, that is still something that's owed to government. It's money that you collected on behalf of the government, so it will have to be paid. Income tax payments are deferred until August 31st. And the final thing is they extended the work sharing program from 38 to 76 weeks. This is a really good program if you've used it before. So, but what we found is it's a very complex system, so it's hard to get into now. So if you haven't been using it in the past, it's probably not something that you can take advantage of. So before I move on to the provincial side, I see there's quite a few questions. So I'm just going to get into some of it. Yes, this is more of a comment. It's basically saying they're not open and the wage subsidy doesn't help. That's true. And they're saying the GST holiday would show real support. That is something that we've discussed with government. We're hoping to get some sort of agreement on that. One of the things for HST that we're hoping is that we can get access to some of that money permanently, and also that in the recovery period when we're trying to get customers back, that they consider maybe waiving the HST off some of the restaurant meals, etc. This question: any further information on rent subsidy qualifications? Yes, I do. Sorry, I just going to my notes. Sorry, I just I lost my train here. Sorry about that. My landlord has mortgages with a private lender and says he doesn't qualify for rental subsidies. Can you clarify what qualifies a mortgage lender? You know, that is something that I have not come across. So what I will do is talk to our federal person who can try and get some clarity on that. It is something we haven't come up with yet. Our understanding is that it's supposed to cover all landlords, but I don't know that for sure. So I will double check. I'll look it up and we will send out an email to everyone that's participating and answer that question. Do you think if this goes beyond 13 weeks, restaurants have to remain closed? Will we pay out termination? So this gets into something that we identified early with the Ministry of Labor. Unfortunately, we haven't come to a conclusion on this. There are a couple problems here. Is if the layoff goes more than 13 weeks, an employee can request to be terminated. Then you would be on the hook for termination and severance pay. Also, if you've laid them off in the last 12-month period, say over the winter, there's been a layoff, and that also adds to the 13 weeks. So you could already be looking at that issue. The province of Manitoba brought in a rule that basically any layoff after March 15th would not count towards this number. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get that from the Ontario provincial government. We are still working on it, and we're hoping for a positive resolution to that. So stand by. Again, if we do get a good resolution of that, I will let people know directly through email, through our messages, as well as put that information on our website. Yes, this person says their sales are only down 65% and they aren't qualifying for the rent subsidy program. That is something we have asked if it's possible to get some wiggle room there. The response back from the government is we have to put the line somewhere, and unfortunately it is something we've tried to address but have had no luck yet. I will note though that when the wage subsidy program was first put in, it was brought in at 10%, then brought up to 55, and then 65, and then 75%. So never say never. Hopefully we can get them to move again, but for right now the answer is unfortunately no. For CEBA, is there an option that stores open in January and February of 2020, so don't meet the 20,000 threshold? So what they did on that, if you can take your January, and if you haven't been open that long, you can take your January and February payroll, average it, and then as long as that averages out to a yearly of 20,000, they're supposed to qualify for CEBA, or the CEBA, sorry. We are that's what we're told. I haven't seen it and talked to anybody who's actually done it, so but that is how the rules are written. So try that. Try when you apply for it. Put in your January and February payroll and see what it averages out to. Do you see the 70% drop in revenue changing to 50% or less? Again, we are working on that. I don't think it'll go down that low, but we could see it adjusted a bit. What's the process for a landlord to evict a tenant? Is it a lengthy process? It actually, the process is that they have to apply after 15 days of non-payment to the province to, well, not to the province, to a provincial body. I call it a sheriff, but I can't remember the actual name. But they apply and they get basically a writ to seize assets and change the locks on the doors. So it basically stops you from going in the premises, and it also stops you from moving stuff out. So we haven't heard. Luckily, we were afraid on the first April 15th that we'd see a lot of this. We actually didn't see that, so we were thankful there. But you know, in 15 days, I don't know if we'll be as lucky. So that is why we approached the provincial government in Ontario and asked for a provision that provinces, or that landlords wouldn't be able to evict or lock out tenants during this period, the same as they did for residential customers. Some provinces have done that. Nova Scotia, namely New Brunswick, kind of did it. They didn't have a mechanism to do it, but they said we won't show up in court if asked to approve one of these writs. So other provinces have done it, but we've had no luck in Ontario, unfortunately. Are you sure TMI is not included in the program? The handout for the ministry speaks to gross rent. That's what we were told. We were informed, told that TMI was not included. It might have something to do with how it's written in your contract. It is definitely something I'll get back to. But when it was first released, and when we talked to the provincial or the federal officials, that's how it was explained to us. But again, it may have something to do with how it's written in the contract, and I will again follow up on that. Slide says that CU's wage subsidies are in place until October 3rd. This has been extended from June 6th. Sorry, my CU's slide. Yeah, I believe that's correct. That's what we were given, what we've been using, and then I believe that Have you heard if the government is looking at refunding the HST payments to businesses? We have asked, but we haven't heard anything, any talk of that happening. The government looks at HST as something that you've collected on their behalf, and that it was never your money. So it is a discussion we keep having. I haven't seen any indication that is something that could happen. We've had more luck asking about future HST to be taken off meals, but in the government's mind, when it's collected, it's theirs. What is the maximum number of weeks of pay in lieu of notice that we will have to give? 1 week for every year of service. This amounts alone could cause a business to be bankrupt. That is true. It's 1 week per year. Depending on how long you've had your staff, it definitely could be a cost that could push you into bankruptcy. Again, that's why we've tried hard to get it changed. And hopefully we can. The good thing is I think most employees don't want to be terminated at this point. If they get terminated, they're no longer eligible for the federal programs. But that being said, if money starts to get tight and they see it as somewhere that they can get money, you never know. So that's why we're working to get it changed. Is Restaurants Canada asking for CEWS to be extended? Yes, we definitely are. In our mind, and right from the start, we've said this isn't a one-shot deal. This is something that restaurants will need going forward into the recovery phase, especially as restaurants start to reopen and they actually have staff to top up their wages. It's something that definitely needs to be done. It's something as when we're operating, wages are the biggest cost to a restaurant. So it is something, it's the easiest way that the government could do to help us out as we enter the recovery period and get through it. Is further rent subsidy being considered by the government to help us all reopen while we likely have heavily reduced sales? Again, I'm not sure where the government's head is at that. We have made the request again to continue the rent subsidy into the recovery period, but we don't have much indication right now. So I'll move on to the next part, which is Ontario Provincial support. So I think you know most of these. Basically, any tax or payment that you pay to the Ontario government has been deferred. Again, it's something that you still owe, but and this includes the WSIB payments that were accrued before the shutdown. So you basically don't have to remit the report or the payments until August 31st. They're also temporarily doubling the employee health tax. So if you pay employee health tax on the first $500,000 of your salaries, they've increased that to $1 million as long as your payroll is under $5 million, which I think everybody's would be. Interest and penalty relief on provincial taxes, I touched on. The time of use pricing, that helps smaller businesses. If you're a mid to medium large business over 1,000 kilowatt hours, you probably aren't benefiting from that. I understand that the price hasn't been adjusted to make up for the loss yet, but it's something we are tracking. And my penultimate slide is this is the Government of Ontario's reopening plan. Unfortunately, there's, as you can see, not to it. It's a 14-page document, but most of it is just it doesn't say at which point workplaces will be reopened. It doesn't say which workplaces are in which stage. So we're just guessing based on other provinces. We've seen in Saskatchewan and Manitoba that the first phase includes patios, and the second phase will include dining rooms. So we're hoping that will be the same here. Unfortunately, their plan didn't have a lot of details. Before I got on this call, about an hour before, the government did release some more details on workplace health and safety. So basically what they expect in the matter of cleanliness and how your employees should interact with patrons. A lot of it is what restaurants are doing now that are open. I will send out a link. I was only able to skim it a little bit because it was released about an hour ago. I will do a deeper dive into what those requirements are and send those out. We're also hoping to get more details from the government on their reopening. They said they're going to be releasing it as they get things done. So as we get more information, I will send it. And finally, Restaurants Canada is working on a guide. It should be ready near the end of the week or early next week. It's basically a protocol to best practices when you're looking to reopen your operation. We will make this available on our website. We'll also send it out. Use, member or not, and we've also provided this to government to start the conversation on what practices we're hoping. Time of use pricing was only in place for 45 days. This was almost expired, won't be extended. Yes, my understanding the time of use pricing ends on May 6th. The Premier was asked about this, I believe, at the end of last week. He indicated he's not a fan of, never been a fan of time of use pricing, and that he wants to keep this in place. He has no announcement yet, but basically the finance minister there, who would be in charge of extending this, and all but told him right there that he wanted to extend it. So we haven't seen any announcement with that yet, but we're hoping to see that shortly before it runs out on, I believe, next Thursday. Will Restaurants Canada be helping with policy templates for new health and safety requirements? Yes, that's going to be the intent of the book that I just talked about, the reopening guidance plan. We will have information on health and safety, on best practices for your employees, best practices for patrons, how to lay out your restaurant, different types of barriers you can use, all that sort of things. What we've done is across the country got the best practices from operators that are open. We've talked to other jurisdictions that have already started to reopen. We have large chains that have dining rooms that have already hired really expensive people to design layout. They've gone above and beyond and have allowed us to access to that information, and we'll make that available to you. So we'll try and get as much information in your hands as we can. And as other as Ontario and any other province comes up with new details, we will update the guide to include those details depending on where you operate. So we're hoping to get that as soon as possible, but as I said, we will provide updates as much as possible. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So I'll just show you, this is my email contact and our website. Go to our website anytime. We have lots of information on that. Sorry, I forgot to put my cell phone number on there. If you want to call me directly, my cell phone is 416-738-9546. And I see I got another question. Is there any discussion on protocols for kitchen exhaust cleaners? I know that has come up in the discussions. I don't know the answer. I know they're working with to find the best practices on that, and it should be in the document. But I'll make sure we can that is addressed. Is there any way that you can know of to get the 40K interest-free loan if you don't have a business bank account? I don't know. I think that would be difficult considering if it's going through a bank, but the best way I can answer that is talk to your banker, talk to the bank you deal with either personally or have a relationship with, or just find a bank and ask them that question. I would assume most banks would like you to have some sort of business with them and a business account to put into, but that's up to you, or that's up to them. Unfortunately, it's their final call. My wife is my partner, but didn't draw a salary. Does she qualify for CERB? I don't think, no. Unfortunately, if she didn't draw a salary or get any money, she wouldn't meet the $5,000 threshold for last year. But if there's any income at all, self-employment, maternity, parental benefits, employment insurance, other benefits that she received, those do count towards the 5,000. So try and look into that. And see if you can put something together that shows that she received money from the ownership of the business. Interesting is a suggestion for social distancing for staff. QSRs are not built to accommodate a 6-foot distancing behind the lines in many circumstances. That is true. That is something we address, that we have to try and keep as much distance and limit the contact. One thing I did notice when I looked at the government's regulations or rules they put out today, and they called it best practices. It only ever said we're recommending or businesses should try to. So at this point, from what I've seen, it isn't a requirement, and I don't think most people would be able to do that. But I think what they're saying is do your best and try and limit the close contact as much as possible. Have you heard of upcoming grants for existing or new businesses in our sector to help with recovery? No, I have not. Unfortunately, we've asked for some of those types of programs. We haven't had a lot of positive feedback. I know the federal government has been putting all their eggs in the baskets they've already announced. The provincial government fortunately hasn't come through with money in our pocket, money in your pockets programs, except they're part of the rent program. But we'll continue to push and hopefully we'll see something. Bank of BDC loans for small businesses, any info or leads? I haven't personally been involved in any of those. I can talk to our vice president of federally, see if he has any information. If the person who wrote this one or anybody wants to send me an email directly, I can try and forward it to someone who has experience on that, on obtaining those loans. Have you contacted any service companies as part of your best practice? Yes, we've worked with our program partners and others such as Diversity and some of our partners that do restaurant design, that do health and safety. We're working with WSPS, who is they advise government on their work safe practices. So yes, we've talked to the experts, we've talked to the leaders in the industries, and that information will be reflected on the guide. Okay, I think we're hitting the end. If your question didn't get addressed or you have a further question you think of, feel free to email me directly or call me, and I hope to help you. Again, thanks everyone for being on today, and I hope all the best. I know it's a tough time, and hopefully brighter days are ahead. So thanks everyone, and have a great day. Bye.